books are canon material, for the most part.
Sure, not everything is canon. The retellings of game events in manga form and the anime that adapts the manga are wrong, but everything else pretty much is. They are all side stories, viewpoints of other characters aside from the protagonists, and things that inform the universe. Case in point, while the retellings tend to be far inferior to the material they're adapting, I still really enjoyed GU Plus for what it was and the contrast it gave. I should also note I'm not going to be able to talk about all the novels that relate to the series. Most of the .hack books were released in the West by Tokyopop, and when they went under, so did any chance of seeing imports of the ones that had yet to be translated or CyberConnect's later web novels. While it's not as important now as it will be with the GU-related material and onwards, it does mean I have to skip out on even giving a summary to .hack 0, which occurs as part of the first era novels and is set between Sign and IMOQ, and was important as it explored more about the fate of Sora, something that will be important when we get to GU. As I've mentioned before in these remastered reviews, .hack 0 is a point of irritation for me, simply because for years there have been all sorts of conflicts about the summarizations of what its content actually is and where it takes place in continuity. Those have only been cleared up in more recent years, but we've still not had a translation of it, and at this point I doubt we ever will since it's an abandoned project as it is.
But we're not talking about GU right now. Those videos are still up on YouTube, and I'm still focused on finishing the remasters of the original first era ones, so today we're still stuck in the first and intermediary eras. As such, let's go all the way back to the beginning before Tsukasa was ever trapped in the world with .hack AI Buster.
I made reference to the book several times, and this is really what tells you why everything about that AU, and for that matter the Mama conspiracy later down the line as a whole, is wrong. While the second book is mainly short stories focused on various characters, the first is centered squarely on Kazushi Watarai, the man behind the player character Alberio. And it starts with him on a typical day in the office, him and his subordinates on the Cobalt Knights hunting the world for bugs to repair and aberrant data to delete. And that includes Vagrant AI, them encountering one of a little girl who can't think of herself as anything more than a failure. The AI escapes, frustrating the man nonetheless. Following this, on one of his off days, Alberio encounters another AI, this time taking the form of an event character, with her being the girl in the red dress, Lycoris. It's characterized as such, as Lycoris attaches herself to Alberio, no other player being able to see her. Even Alberio is initially taken in by it, as her appearance has vastly changed from which she bore when the Knights first attempted to delete her, and the quest is to collect the missing parts of her programming. He takes her back to Makanu, where they encountered the third man for their band, the player Hokuto. Hokuto is a secondary character for the user Haruka Mizuhara, who is known online as the net poet W.B. Yeats, and like Alberio, is a player from the beginnings of the game. They encounter her due to an in-game event where monsters invade the root towns, which Lycoris gets them involved in order to recover another of her fragments. This, however, draws the eye of players we're more aware of, specifically Balmung and Orca, who are preparing to fight the One Sin, the monster which would give the pair their titles of the Azure Sea and Sky, and are further interested by Alberio's Spear of Wotan, an item removed after the fragment beta ended, which leads to an explanation of their characters and why they chose what they chose.
If you can't tell from how I'm summarizing, I'm leaving a lot out while touching on the major incidents. AI Buster's stories are more about character insight, history of the world only touched upon in the games and liminality, and a lot of things people that love the games would enjoy, even though there are a few inconsistencies with Sign and the games that can just be retconned as there having been a patch that removed those elements.
One of the things they do explain are the facial and body tattoos. They are each character's wave, their primary elemental alignment. Yes, armor, weapons, and stat books alter these alignments, but it's the one they're most strongly attuned. And the part involving elements is actually a later payoff. Watarai tries to log off to get back to work, only to find that the command isn't triggering while the Lycoris event is active. Unlike future Lost ones, however, he isn't trapped in the game, leaving the program running as he goes about his daily routine, him having spent the whole night in the office. He encounters Kamui, who's not been long on the job, and she is used to lead into his views on the world, why the AI and bugs they hunt are becoming more and more difficult to deal with over time, as opposed to the company's view on the matters. Frankly, this part gives a great explanation of why CC Corp would later do what they do. The manager shoved all of the programmers and developers of the game out of the company before the product was finished. Thus, they had no idea their company was basing their entire business model around a ticking time bomb, refusing to believe anything was wrong, and also why they can't fix it. Telling of Harold Hurwick's infamous black box file, which we in the later parts of the series knows contains the data for the creation of artificial intelligences, primarily Aura. And the last of that purge would be when they injected Tokuoka, when he first discovered something was wrong. Tokuoka is gone by this point in continuity, by the way. Watarai once working with him, though before he logs back on, he notices a message from Haruka under her pen name, the text containing one of the lost pieces of the epitaph.
Yet to return, the Shadowed One, who quests for the Twilight Dragon, rumbles the dark earth. And Helba, Queen of the Dark, has raised her army. Aperion, King of Light, beckons. At the base of the rainbow they meet, against the abominable wave. Together they fight. Alba's lake boils. Light's great tree doth fall. Power, all now to droplets turned, in the temple of Archaicon, returns to nothing, this world of shadowless ones. Never to return, the shadowless ones, who quest for the Twilight Dragon. Seriously, a lot of people wanted the Epitaph of Twilight to be completed with stuff like that. And this? Dadac Archives Volume 3, the actual Book of Twilight. You have no idea how long it took me to find a copy of this.
Albeit Rio logs back in, and, in mindless conversation with Lycoris, she ends up warping them along with Hokuto to the field where Balmog and Orca are challenging the One Sin.
Yeah, this book actually contains the events of them conquering that infamous monster. Even if it's viewed from an outsider's perspective, it's actually a really good scene, and indicative of why Balmog, while capable of being an idiot, was picked out by the company to assist in both the Twilight incident and later becoming one of their admins.
The key to the monster was it only ever countered, in the same way it was attacked. Thus, the way that you beat it is for one to attack and the other to counter the counter with the opposing elemental attack, dealing double the damage it was then aligned to. It's why both solo players and groups of 3 failed against the beast. The synergy between 2 players was needed for this. Granted, they could have brought along a Wave Master be an exclusive healer, but that's not exactly a guarantee, as they would have had to recruit a solo player, and solo Wave Masters tend to be offensive spellcasters. Balmug deals the killing blow and is granted his signature wings, the field permanently changing, and in the midst of this, Alberio recovers another of Lycoris' programs, with Lycoris then warping them to another field, which holds her next piece, diving into a mist spring. And after this, asking Alberio if he can actually see this all through, on whether he can count on him to actually do what needs to be done. Alberio recovers her in Lycoris' last program, which he keeps from her, using his administrative authority to warp themselves to a locked area the Cobalt Knights use exclusively for AI deletion. For the AI that escaped at the beginning was Lycoris herself, Alberio recognizing this part way into the collection of her pieces that had been scattered. And Lycoris was unaware of all of this, as the last fragment contained her memory. Alberio once more reassuring himself that the behaviors of AI are just irrelevant in the game. However, Lycoris is no ordinary vagrant AI. She is in fact Aura's progenitor, the prototype for the ultimate AI. She was deemed as nothing more than a failure, one needed to be deleted before the creation of Aura could truly begin. And the fracturing of her data and its scattering was not of her own doing. Yes, even at this point, Morgana was moving against her own programming. For as long as Lycoris' data was scattered but still intact, Aura's creation could not begin. It's why Lycoris was left by herself out in the open, as a defenseless child, as her data could remain scattered to the winds, and the ultimate AI forever kept from its birth if the data could not be recollected into its, for lack of a better term, body. And knowing of her failure, Lycoris could not let that be. She is the child not yet seen, the man lamented. That is why I will name her Aura. Without you, this child would not have been in existence. Aura, the child who shines like the light. Let us entrust our will to her. Let us entrust our future to her. She is our... I'm a failure? You are a product of a failed attempt at realizing my dream. I'm sorry it had to end this way. In this, he shows her her past, something she saw just before Alberio came to delete her. For Morgana was the one that sent the bug report sending the knights after her. There were no players there, nothing else that needed their attention. The administration, the god of this world, tried to delete her. She is nothing more than an unwanted child. It's this dialogue and such that succeeds it that leads to Alberio's own revelation. With the system itself trying to kill the girl that can only exist within it, she finally just gave up on running from her fate. And that his own spear, the Spear of Wotan, has been used by the system to bring about its own ends and endgame, instead of the AI being undeletable as they normally should be by the game's reckoning, with Lycoris herself modifying the AI deletion program Morgana implanted into it, and giving it the capacity to truly kill her. I am the product of a failed attempt. I must die. I have failed to achieve his dream. Therefore, it's time I finished. This isn't right! We've come a long way together, Alberio, and I'm afraid this is the end of your event with me. Everything went white, and she was gone. Subject deleted appeared on my screen. I hadn't activated the switch. She had done it herself. Lycoris had taken her own life. Wataru logs out and mulls over what he learns, getting a message from Hokuto's other alias containing a poem about the one Sin battle that gets him to connect the dots, but he's too emotionally destroyed to care, looking back upon his PC screen and finding his character among a field of flowers. The final epitaph of the unloved creation of the world. The AI Lycoris.
Spider lilies. They bloom in the autumn, pointing their leaves towards the winter sun. In spring, while the other flowers grow and bloom, they die alone. Subfamily Amaryllidoideae. Genus Lycoris.
As said, the second book is more a collection of one-shots, the first two tying into Lycoris' story. The first of them, second character, is Haruka's viewpoint of the Lycoris event from her time spent as Hokuto and adventuring with Alberio and the unwanted AI. Wotan's Spear, the second story, covers the events that would set off the Twilight incidents. Months after Lycoris' death, Alberio has become a wreck, dedicated to his duties while trying to unravel what the god of the world is up to, and unable to get past the specter of Lycoris he sees in his mind. While meeting up with Hokuto again, the only person he could really connect with to understand what the hell he's feeling, he hears rumors of a cat-modded PC and confronts it. However, this is right where Sign begins, and the cat PC is Maha. And Maha, being a piece of the goddess that created the AI deleting Spear of Wotan, is immune to its power. The spear and its unique program being destroyed, with Alberio becoming the first relevant victim of the cursed wave.
However, that is not where the story ends. It also bookends the Twilight incident as Unison did, Wataru and Haruka afterwards meeting in real life after the man was fired, the entire cursed wave fiasco pinned on him. The two end up deciding to move in together, and eventually end up dating for some time. While the GU games and novels end up having conflicting updates on their status, I prefer the version presented in a special email Haseo receives, describing the two as still being together as of 2017. And that is backed up in .hack Quantum, where Haruka has become a well-respected translator, and has a daughter named Riko, presumed by all fans to be the result of the two's relationship.
The third story, Kamui, is where the hell I got entitled enough to call the character we saw in the Legend of Twilight anime a hypocritical bitch. Sure, she was a very minor character during the Lycoris story, but this is where the meat of it comes from, as Kamui tracks one of her subordinates to an area where she has sheltered a vagrant AI that has reached the self-actualization point of its own development, and threatens it with deletion with CC Corp's mass-produced recreations of the Spear of Wotan that are ultimately all flawed. "Why do you want to delete me?" Lin asked simply. "Because you're a bug." "I am Lin. You are Kamui. We are both residents of the world." Lin reached his hand out. "I am also Saki Shibayama, a debugger in Cobalt Knight. From my perspective, you are nothing but an illegal program. From God's perspective, the existence of you and I are blessed by this world." As Lin spoke, he gripped the tier of my spear with his bare hands. Suddenly, I couldn't move my arms. "What do you mean, God?" I asked the vagrant AI. "God is the world," Lin answered. The world itself? Yes, you who borrowed the powers of the old god should know that. Old god? Are you talking about the divine spear of Wotan? Yes, the one that should be deleted is his false spear.
And I could not think of a better line to cap why I couldn't stand Kamui in that anime than what was presented here.
You have no soul. You are nothing but a collection of ones and zeros.
Do these units have a soul?
I'm just doing my job. The story appropriately ending with Kamui seeking a doctor's help for controlling signs she is fatigued. Her hunt for AIs and system bugs, the only thing that gives her proof that she is alive anymore. Likewise, reaching the burnout that her mentor once held that left him an emotional wreck. The story Rumor plays host to Rena Kunisaki before she took on the mantle of Black Rose's PC, then known to the world as Bridget, as she encounters a vagrant AI that has taken on the identity of a Wave Master. Rumor is actually an interesting character, one that seeks the secrets of the world and whether they are simply that of his namesake, a rumor. It's not a bad story, there's just not much to it. And lastly, out of AI Busters, the story Firefly, which focuses on Hotaru from Legend of Twilight and his backstory, as he first logs onto the world's Japanese servers and his first steps in trying to establish ties to those who live his cultural heritage, also encountering Sanjuro, who ends up helping him out.
The AI Buster books are good reads for those who enjoy the first era of .hack, and Lycoris' story in and of itself is an excellent piece, only weighted down with an exposition that ends up being a bit dated if you've already experienced Sign in the games. The short stories in the second book follow up on it, before leading into the next portion of the franchise, and help fleshing out their character motivations. Which is probably a good segue into talking about the manga version of Legend of the Twilight Bracelet. So, what is so different in the manga, you might be asking?
First of all, Shugo and Reina actually did win a character contest. Hotaru, as mentioned before, is a guy, and or appeared to them as the character data for Kite is not complete without the bracelets. And also because the two met when Shugo was a player years before. After the conclusion of the first 7 chapters, the writer of them, Tatsuya Hamazaki, who also, as I've mentioned before, wrote the AI Buster novels, introduces Zephy, a vagrant AI that is the actual daughter of Aura, who encounters Shugo and company and asks that they return her to her mother, who she's become separated from. However, this is where the Cobalt Knights become involved, the company's stance on vagrant AI having not changed in the 4 years since the Twilight incident, despite those same policies having set it off. Balmug, knowing this, fights Kamui, who is not a bitch in this incarnation, but as I said, is an idealist trying to maintain the safety of the world the way she believes her mentor would have wanted her to, also targeting Shugo for the same reason Leos did for Kite, the bracelet being an illegal item in the views of the company, on top of his association with the vagrant AI, which she views as a ban-worthy offense in and of itself simply due to what they did to Alborio. After several battles with the Knights, Balmug, at the cost of his job, manages to get them free and to Netslum, which is of course still running, and after a battle to prove his worth, Shugo is granted the area words for Aura's location. Here, the mother and daughter are reunited and leave the world behind them, which has increasingly become a less hospitable place for them thanks to CC Corp, ending on moments of the other principal characters enjoying the world as it is now, as the goddess finds her heaven is no longer the place for her.
Aura's abandonment of the world would lead to a system crash that would irreparably damage the world R1, causing once more what CC Corp's policies were made to avoid, and lead to events discussed and made relevant with GU. And that summary of the manga sounds a hell of a lot better than the stupid anime, doesn't it?
The manga gets to me as I read it immediately after AA Buster the first time, as Zephy's data was created from the remnants Aura could find of Lycoris, the prototype for the Ultimate AI, and how Aura couldn't leave the remnants of her older sister to be scattered through the world, and thus recombined what she could find into Zephy to create her daughter. Statements she made to Kamui reflect that, as Kamui's first day on the job involved the Cobalt Knights' attempt to delete Lycoris before the Twilight incidents.
Something that is unfortunately not made very clear in the English translation of AI Buster. Sadly, they accidentally screwed up the pronouns used to refer to Kamui's character, as she is present and the one Alborio talks to on and off in the real-world segments of that novel. But the Tokyo Pop translation kept referring to her as a guy. It sadly lost context in something really important to these tales, and unfortunately not the only time it happens. Looking at you, Rebirth Secret Mail.
This ultimately culminates in Zethy having to delete ghost data of Lycoris, a shadow of who she was in her last life. That girl unwanted by all those who sought her creation, as she searches for and is then reunited with the mother that allowed her reincarnation anew out of simply love. The love Aura never was able to gain from her own mother.
It's the final nail in the coffin for why the anime sucks so badly. Had they delayed the damn adaptation 1 year, hell, even 6 months, we could have gotten this story instead. And that never ceases to irritate me.
That takes us to the Another Birth novels. Dot Hack Another Birth is the story of the Dot Hack games from the point of view of Akira Hayami, the woman behind the player character Black Rose. Events get shuffled slightly, and party choices differ from what I and other players might have chosen for in-game events, but it's not this retelling that makes the 4 books strong. Instead, what makes them good is the view into the mind of the woman that was just as much on the front lines of the Second Network Crisis as Kite was. Ironically, it's because we've seen the events of the games already that I find the highlights of the book being Akira's real-life experiences, specifically the interaction between her classmates and elements of her personal life, as she takes a proactive role in finding a way to save her brother Hirokazu offline as well, getting in contact with a number of people to help find the clues that lead to their allies and successes, as well as scenes of her in the world that we didn't get more than lip service of via emails in the games. Descriptions of one of her tennis matches, even.
Really, I think these are a good series of books, and a unique edition starring the girl that seems to be forgotten behind Kite. Though the books do support the popular interpretation that there is something more between Kira and Kite of a romantic inclination, so the shippers of the franchise outright adore them because of it. However, that also brings us to our last books of the day, and how they stomp on that. Dot Hack X-Fourth.
X-Fourth was a 2-book manga retelling of the first 4 games made during the GU years of the franchise. Approved from the desk, unfortunately, by Hiroshi Matsuyama, no less, as he is credited as the man behind the original story, instead of, the people who actually wrote the original story.
You'll see why I find that such an insult in a minute.
The manga was written and drawn by Megane Kikuya, and this woman does not get Dot Hack at all. None of the subtext, character complexity, or lore, which are honestly needed if you want to make a compilation movie on events, or a short version manga of said stories. It really does not capture any of what made the first era of Dot Hack such an interesting to explore multimedia franchise.
Unfortunately, the damage she did was just related to these 2 books, and the Dot Hack Link tie-in manga adaptation that everybody hated as it was worse than Link.
As the manga starts to go wrong with the introduction of a new OC character. Can you guess who it is? Why, Kubiya, of course.
Yes, how could you ever tell?
Why has Kubiya taken PC form? Why, to get closer to Kite, and straight up seduce him. I'm not kidding on that. His eventual goal being to absorb the power of the bracelet and take over the system itself, when that's not how that works, nor what Kubiya is. Kubiya is an AI fragment with the intelligence of a monster, brought in creation at the same time as the bracelet to act as its counterbalance, as it's the only way in the Morgana Mode Gone controlled system that Aura could create it, as aberrancies in the world like that create this kind of anomalous data. To destroy the bracelet means to destroy Kubiya, and the same would occur if Kubiya itself were to absorb the bracelet, as that's its actual job.
Without darkness, light cannot shine, and were the darkness were to swallow the light, it too would cease to have purpose. And without purpose, a concept withers away. Kubiya is supposed to be an aberrant birth, the beast that shouts "I" in defiance of a perversion of the world. It is not the kind of thing you can anthropomorphize into a humanoid to then create an out-of-nowhere yaoi ship with the main protagonist. That's what we have Kaoru Ichinose for.
Kubiya's introduction and alliance with Kite ends up splintering the camaraderie and unification that would result in being needed for the world's salvation. Black Rose being completely replaced in the party by the monster in man's guise. Aura likewise abandoning Kite herself, despite him being her only potential salvation, due to his association with Morgana's hidden phase. instead relying on Black Rose to be a relay between the groups, as Kite is the only one who can save everyone. Even as he instead acts like an imbecile and ignores his responsibilities, which is not something Kite does. But as I said, Kubiya has completely supplanted himself in what would have been her place, and the relationship that would form from their journey to save their loved ones, which would develop into an unbreakable bond, snaps before it can be set in stone.
You ever think that Japan might just hate showcasing relationships in media? I mean, their content regularly jerks us around with the will they won't they stance on people hooking up, and 90% of the time leaves it a fucking ambiguous ending when they're done with it. But now, in an adaptation, it shows us that we're just morons for ever thinking that in the first place. Well, you ever think that maybe showing people actually hooking up would be a good thing? I mean, Japanese shows, games, and manga have created a hell of a lot of shipping wars on the matters where they chose to just not give it closure. And what has likely resulted from being so careless with showing how to develop an interpersonal relationship? Nearly half of Japan's population doesn't see the value in starting one with anyone. Made worse with Japanese employment policies that are downright sexist, with expecting women to never come back to the workplace after getting pregnant, even though no family anywhere in the world can support having children without both parents having stable paying jobs anymore. No, seriously, look all that up. There was an actual study done and everything.
And of course, I even find it most insulting because it's a woman that wrote this, intentionally giving Kite and Kubiya a Hoye vibe, when there was more than enough opportunity to better showcase Black Rose in this, for as I've said repeatedly, Black Rose gets shafted again and again despite being the better character of the two. And of course, with Kubiya's machinations, things get worse, such as Maha fully possessing Mia and attacking Elk. And it's also irreparably painted that the bracelet is the true cause of the virus in this story, as it's acting in opposition of the world's root program, Morgana Mode Gone. You know, as opposed to Morgana going rampant herself, and the contradictions in logic creating malignant data corruptions and viruses. The climax of this being all but Kubiya abandoning Kite, which plays right into Kubiya's hands. Aura saves Black Rose from Tarvos, as in this version she's never fractured, which stalls the development she needed to grow beyond Morgana and supplant her in the first place.
Which is the entire reason she needed to die at the apex of Korbenek's rebirth in the first place. She needed to be part of the system reset to take in all of the data she still needed to transcend and become the true ultimate AI and stop Morgana. If she's still been active and not scared as in this version, she'd still be accumulating the data and been able to do it herself. You see what I mean about this manga contradicting things with the games? Yes, some could argue that it's an adaptation, and they need to let things slide for the medium change. But that's the thing about .hack. Even taking just one part of the mainline series into account, nearly everything has some form of meaning that screwing with it screws up far more. Case in point, as is my usual example, the Mama conspiracy retcons. Everything from character design, motivations, and development to the mythology of the games within a game to all the expanded universe things end up mattering. That's why I'm even doing these books as part of the reviews in the first place. While you don't need anything else to understand them, they mattered to the depiction of a greater whole. Even things that frustrated me made sense from the setting we were given, and this manga repeatedly ignores and contradicts that. And the root of all that comes from the insertion of Kubiya into the cast as an infiltrator, and not as a beast specifically created to encounter the immense power of the bracelet. They do try the Lycoris, I'm a failure empathy thing, but as I said, it doesn't work because we know that's not what Kubiya is, and not his role in the story. They even pull out the cliche I've known all along card from Kite, but it doesn't work due to the scenes preceding it essentially turning Kite into a shallow shell of himself. Too much of a spineless coward to do anything that matter in achieving the goal of saving his friend. With the final phase coming, and Black Rose being Korbenek's first fatality. And thank you for once again missing the point. I'll give this manga 2 credits, however. This redesign of Korbenek is freaking awesome, highly reminiscent of its GU counterpart, and that Morgana is a more active antagonist through the book, culminating in her
assuming direct control
over Korbenek. And then the author screws it up by bringing Orca back out of his coma to block a blow meant for Kite. Yes, they did something like that at the climax of the games, but it included everyone that was trapped in the world. Every lost one being used to breach Corbinek's barrier, which only the bracelet they thought could break. Here, it's used in a completely different manner, and it was instigated by Kubiya after his deletion. Together, Kite, Balmog, and Orca crushed Corbinek, Kite using a skill later indicative of his GU counterpart, before Morgana manifests from the remains.
Yeah, forget what I said about the author using Morgana more confidently. She just lost that credit.
Kite stabs Aura, which, after Corbinek's destruction, should just cause her deletion since the power of the rebirth could no longer be triggered, and after that Kite kills Morgana. Again, Morgana does not work like that. Everyone is restoring. It gives us what I think is Hiroshi Matsuyama's only real contribution, on how the nature of the world is not only to create a child of Harold Horwick and Emma Weiland, but to complete her unfinished epitaph through the will and experiences of the players. Oh, and there's a postscript at the end about this being Migane's first professional work.
I still feel like I should give her lenience for her crimes against the franchise for that, but I still say avoid her body of work.
I think I've established by now that through all the various videos I've done about this franchise that I really love Dot Hack. I do. It's more than just a game or an anime or a novel for me. It's an encompassing experience that you get more out of the more you know about it. Adaptations like this, that outright ignore or contradict what they establish for no real reason, I find horrendous because they work against what CyberConnect was building. Not just a group of characters in a setting for telling stories, but an actual world. Dot Hack AI Buster, Another Birth, and the Legend of the Twilight manga all work toward these goals in fleshing out the universe, fleshing out the characters, background details, and show why Aura would move on from her existence of the goddess of the world. They have problems I acknowledge that I skipped over in my summarization for time, but they in no way majorly hurt the stories they were telling. Those are the kinds of things most writers should work towards. Having little nitpicks of where someone might have done something stupid, but nothing that overly hurts or results in contradictions in the plot. X-Forth, however, is the opposite. Bogged down by what we know, but also hindered by the story not managing to justify itself within its own narrative, as it contradicts its central point and journey by making it a curt comfort fanfic, where the protagonist finds happiness in the arms of one of his central enemies.
And as I read fanfiction, I've seen that story done a lot better in that medium than it was here.
And made that much more invalid by that knowledge. So it's hard to believe the writer in any way knew anything more than a general plot summary, despite the games being out for years before this specific manga was written.
And that's my final word on the matter. If you can track down these 9 books, you'll have just that much more of canon material to explore and enrich yourself with, but trust me, skip X-Forth. It is absolutely not worth it. At all. And with that, this completes all of the remasters of old videos on my original retrospective that I was never able to get up on YouTube before. So if this is your first time through them, well, expect a quality reduction when the playlist loops back around to the GU material that was done back in 2014 and 2015. Who knows, maybe I'll get around to remastering those with last recode footage at some point. But in the meantime, thank you all for watching. I'm Shinta, and I'll see you all next time.